Have you wondered what insomnia really is and how to get to the other side, to a place of leaving the struggle forever? Well, then this video is for you. We're going to take a look at exposure therapy. We're going to learn a little bit about what it is, what I think are some of the problems in the traditional approach, and how exposure therapy, or rather, I should say, the ideas behind it, truly apply to insomnia. But before we do, I want to say a big thank you to Juliana Sriapio for becoming the second ever sleep hero and sponsoring this episode. It means so much. If you want to learn how you can become a sleep hero, then check out our description where there's a link to our Patreon page. Thanks again, Juliana. It means so much, really. All right, back to our topic. So again, many have pointed out to me that, hey, what you're doing here, Daniel, is very similar to exposure therapy. And I've seen that myself. And one way that I think this can be helpful to know is that exposure therapy is, very established, and it can take away a little bit of like the woo factor. A lot of what I talk about here is very different from what you hear in maybe other, teachings on sleep and insomnia. But when you see that, what Daniel's talking about is actually quite similar to the ideas behind this very established a way to meet phobias, for example, then that can be helpful. You can see that things I say, generally speaking, do make sense, I think, right? So I really want to talk. I've been looking forward to this episode. So again, we're going to talk about what exposure therapy is, what I see is a problem in the traditional sense, and how to apply all this to insomnia. So let's jump right in and talk about what exposure therapy is. In fact, I want to share my screen with you so we can take a look at the American Psychological Association and their definition, or what they say about it. What is exposure therapy? They say exposure therapy is a psychological treatment. Sorry about that. Psychological treatment that was developed to help people confront their fears. When people are fearful of something, they tend to avoid the feared objects, activities, or situations. I agree with all of this, of course, especially like the last part, that when we're scared of something, we tend to avoid it. And what wasn't said here, but what is sort of implied, is that if we're scared of something and we avoid it, it doesn't really change our thoughts around it. And I've talked about this much lately. So we've seen, briefly, that is what exposure therapy is, in a nutshell. And so what is this thing I talk about as the problem with exposure therapy? Well, really, it is sort of the same critique I have of CBT-I, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is what I call implied controllability. It isn't said, I don't think you'll find in a textbook on CBT or CBT-I where it says that you can control your thoughts, or you can control your emotions, you can control your reactions. I don't think that's ever said, but it's implied that we can control how we think, feel, how we associations we that are created within us in this teaching. And I see that's the same when it comes to exposure therapy. I'm by no means an expert on this. So if you happen to be a psychologist or somebody who really understands this on a deeper level than I do, then please let me know in the comment section if there's anything I omitted, because I'm always looking to learn more, of course. But with this said, what I mean with this implied controllability, well, let's go back into this website and take a look. So it says here that exposure therapy can be helpful for phobia, panic disorder, a bunch of things. I think this is so true. I think so much of what we call mental health issues are really phobias. So I totally believe that the ideas behind exposure therapy can be really helpful. Now, that said, again, it says here there are several variations of exposure therapy, and these include in vivo exposure, directly facing a feared object, situation, or activity in real life. For example, someone with fear of snakes may be instructed to handle a snake, or someone with social anxiety may be instructed to give a speech in front of an audience. And in one way, this is exactly what I believe, that when we're willing to face what we fear, then we see that there was nothing really to be scared of. But you see, in this case, someone was instructed to handle a snake. Someone says, like, okay, here's the snake, now touch the snake, right? And the thing is that this is actually not, it's not actually truly what will happen. Like, it's not truly what we're scared of. When we're scared of snakes, we're probably scared of seeing a snake when we're out hiking or something like that. And although we're actually touching a snake in this scenario, it's not the same. It's kind of an artificial environment, all right? And we have imagined exposure when we're vividly imagining the feared object, but it's again, we're instructed to do so. And we also, so these were like there are four versions of this here, and there's also not versions of the therapy itself, but it can be graded or paced. They say here exposure therapy can be paced in different ways. This includes graded exposure, where you start with kind of what we fear the least and then go up towards what you fear the most. Maybe it's like, starting with hearing about snakes, or like seeing a snake to actually touching a snake that way, or flooding, where you go the other way around. You kind of directly go to what you're most scared of, and then walk the other way, and work with it the other way. And there's some more on this website, but I think what we talked about already has given us enough to explore what I think of as problematic, which is this implied controllability thing. And I've broken up this into three sections here. I call them A, B, and C. So A is an artificial environment, so you may actually, if you've been scared of snakes, for example, you may actually have held a snake, in your therapist's office, or you went to like a, I don't know, veterinarian or something, or did it. But the thought can so easily become, yes, I'm okay with this now, but what if I saw a snake in real life? It's artificial. B, with this, when it comes to this graded exposure, there's this implied message that, okay, I should be okay with reading about snakes, and that in itself, when we start kind of thinking of our feelings that way, we kind of judge them and think, I should feel this, I shouldn't feel that way. That in itself is quite tricky, because easily, it can become that when somebody says, oh, first we're going to start reading about snakes, and that, that should be fine, right? That's pretty easy. And we're like, oh my gosh, this should be easy, but I'm scared. I shouldn't be scared. That in itself can be very triggering and scary. On the flip side, when somebody does, let's say, flooding, and says, oh, this is going to be really scary, we're going to go straight straight into you touching the snake, like, oh, this is supposed to be really scary. But wait, I'm not that scared. Oh, that was actually easier than that. You can see how when we try to forecast and predict our own reactions, it becomes very, very tricky. So I think, again, this is implied controllability to me. And then I think C here is that we have the ideal way dilemma. When you read about, okay, you can do it this way, you can do it that way, you can do it this way, that way, we can easily think that, oh, there has to be the perfect way for me. I just have to find it, which can lead us endless, this endless loop of trying to find the ideal way. So I think that, what truly helps is exposure to our fears as it happens in real life, without any artificial elements, or any prediction of how we should feel. I think that really truly leads us to see that we are safe. And now the question becomes, okay, Daniel, how does all this apply to insomnia? Well, I think truly of insomnia as a type of phobia, if you will, where we have become scared of not sleeping. We have a fear of being awake. And many people have pointed out to me that exposure therapy for insomnia is sort of like befriending wakefulness. Again, I'm not a doctor. Well, I happen to be a medical doctor, but I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not, I don't provide any therapy. I'm a coach, right? But the idea behind exposure therapy is very much the idea behind befriending wakefulness. So that leads us to a final section, which is like, I want to explore two common questions comes up that when somebody starts seeing this. And one is this one. What if I sleep now, but I'm still scared? I think I had somebody ask me this last week, actually. And they said, do I need to like force myself to be awake so I can expose myself to wakefulness? And my reply to that is no. Then we're in this kind of artificial environment type situation again. You may be like, okay, I have to be awake now, so I can expose myself to being awake. But then that wakefulness is kind of controlled. It's not the wakefulness that comes from fear that is the one we fear, right? So that will not help. And the other one that very, very often comes up is like, okay, I've watched Hulu all night, but I still don't sleep. Meaning somebody says, I've done the befriending wakefulness. I've exposed myself to being awake all night, but I'm still not sleeping. But then here we see that insomnia is actually not about sleep or wakefulness. It's about what underlies the underlying thing, which is the fear of something, fear of wakefulness. So when somebody's like, I watched Hulu all night, but I'm still not sleeping, that means that person has actually tried to escape the fear by befriending wakefulness, if you will. They've tried to use, they try to make them kind of force themselves to be okay with being awake so that they will sleep. In a way, they've not actually confronted the fear. They've again tried to escape the fear by doing something to make the fear go away. And so I think what happens in this example is that we have to understand that the layers, that being awake is just a product of fear, and when we befriend wakefulness is like, yes, it's about exposing ourselves to being awake, but that's not the point. The point is to expose ourselves to the fear of being awake. And I try to summarize everything here and in a sentence like this: when we understand that insomnia is fear of not sleeping, and we expose ourselves to this fear in whatever shape it comes, not in an artificial way, and in whatever way we find easiest. It doesn't have to be watching Netflix. It can be resting. It can be reading a book. It can be anything you want that makes it easiest. That's when magic starts happening. You have the understanding. You understand that you can expose yourself to this fear whenever it happens. It doesn't have to be artificial. It doesn't have to be in an ideal way. That's when magic happens. That's when peaceful sleep and peace of mind comes your way. Hope you found this super helpful. And if you'd like to learn more about exposure therapy or the ideas behind it and how they apply to sleep, well, then explore this channel. It's really all about that. But if you would like some more help on your path to sleeping well for the rest of your life, then please head over to our website and look at the coaching options. Surely there will be one that suits you very well, and we can help you. We love a chance to do that. So thanks for being here. Thanks to Juliana, and see you soon. Until then, bye-bye.